In this video, I'm going to talk about IBM Copy Servers User Manager 6.2.12. We plan to GA the 6.2.12 release on April 30th of 2021. So first, this is my intro screen. If you've seen any of my videos before, you'll know that this is what I put up to start with. Just what is Copy Servers Manager? You're a one-stop shop for your replication needs on IBM storage systems. We cover the DS8000 to the Spectrum products to the Flash system products. We run basically anywhere you want to install this, Windows, Linux, AX, even on ZOS, and we come pre-installed in the DS8000 HMC now. We cover your disaster recovery, your high availability, we have your practice sessions, and we have loads of ways to protect your data from warning prompts to user roles, site awareness, etc. That was very quick overall, but that's what CSM is. All right, here's a quick look at the things I'm going to be talking about. We'll talk about a number of RFEs. Those are requests for enhancements coming straight from you, the customer, on things you want to see in CSM. You'll see that we have a total of 8 that we've implemented this release, and I'll get into the details now. All right, the first one. The first one I want to talk about is the RFE 145162. What that is was a request to provide support for an external syslog. So as many of you use CSM know, we do hold historical data for all of our audit information. So all the messages that get written to the console for any actions you perform within CSM, we will store those. However, there are customers that want to, either for audit purposes, hold them for longer amounts of time, or they want to perform some sort of automation on various messages, use external syslog servers to do that. So an example of an external syslog server might be Splunk. That's a common one being used nowadays. So we, in this release, did not embed a way to externalize those messages to a syslog server. What we did, though, is document how you can use existing file monitors to send those messages to the external syslog server. It could be any file monitor, but our syslog is really the one we use as an example. Our syslog comes on a lot of Linux systems already, but there is a Windows-based version for it if you run CSM on Windows as well. But essentially what you'll do is you'll set up the file monitor of our syslog to one point to your external syslog server, whether it be Splunk or some other system, and then point the file monitor to the CSM message.log file. So that's the file that holds all that audit information. All right, the next feature is RFE 145476. This is support for programmatically enabling and disabling a scheduled task. So as you may know, CSM has what we call scheduled tasks. These allow you to string together multiple commands or actions against one or more sessions on the CSM server, and really makes you be able to script within CSM itself without having to write your own external scripting service, etc. However, it was originally designed with the thought that you create it in a GUI and you enable it once and it just runs for however long, forever maybe. Well, we found that the customer request here was involving a auto provisioning case. So they had some scripting that already provisioned some volumes automatically and then went to go add them to the session, or multiple sessions. And what they wanted to do was really stop the safeguarded copy backups from occurring while they did this auto provisioning, to prevent any issues between the two and to make sure everything started backing up again accordingly. So what they needed was the ability to, through our APIs, to enable or disable so that they could do that programmatically. So now we have in the CLI, you have your run task -enable option parameter. If you specify yes, it'll enable it. Specify no, it'll disable it. And so you can do the CLI that way, or we also have the REST interface, which I showed there. It's very similar. You provide the task ID, and it'll enable or disable it as well. So hopefully you can see this will make it a lot easier, so now that you can programmatically do what you're looking to do. All right, now I'm going to talk about RFE 148106. This is another scheduled task work item. It's for running a scheduled task once at a specified time. So today in the CSM, we allow you to enable, like we just talked about, you can enable or disable a scheduled task based off a certain schedule. You can also set a task to not have a schedule, and if you do that, you can run it manually. So you can click on the task and then select run, and it will run that task at the time that you issue that command. So there was no way to have a customer schedule that task to run once sometime in the future. For example, maybe you had some plans to do something overnight. You didn't necessarily want to log in at 1 a.m. and click the run task. Well, now with this 6.2.12 release, you can use the -@time option, or in the GUI, you can use run task at specified time and select it to run once at the time you give it. So you can say, hey, I want to run this particular task I created, but I don't want to run it till 1 a.m. Kick it off, issue the command, and then it'll run at that time later on down the road. A couple notes, you can only do this if the task is not already enabled. So if it's already enabled and has a schedule running on it, you can't schedule it to run in the future. You can still run it once when you manually, but it will only run when you issue that run task command. You can't schedule it for the future because we can't have two schedules going on. So you can do this new one if you don't have a schedule running and just want to run it once later on. Another thing is that this new -@time parameter in the CLI gives you the ability to combine it with the -enable. So if you do both of those parameters on the run task command, you are now not only able to enable it like I talked about in the last work item, but you can enable it at a specific time. So you can not only run a task at a specific time, but now you can enable that task at a specific time. So if you do have a schedule, but you don't want to start it right now, you want to start it later in the future, or you want to programmatically start it in the future at a given time, say it's that same kind of provisioning case we talked about with the enable. You don't want to just enable and disable and re-enable it again right away. You want to enable it again at a time in the future so that it runs at the certain offset of the hourly clock each time. You can set both params, and it'll enable it in the future time. All right, now I'm going to talk about RFE 148844. Include the server host name as part of the backup file. So this wasn't a huge one, but it was a quick one that we could do because we had a customer that created backups for CSM servers. If you don't know, you can go into the GUI Advanced Tools panel, click a button, and it will create a backup file of your CSM server. And we've enhanced that recently in later releases, so the backup file actually contains more than just the database information. It contains all your properties and all those extra files that you might need to restore a server back to the exact same image. Well, if you click that and it creates a file, before all we did was really give it a timestamp. This is the time that the backup was created. Now what we're doing with this RFE is appending in that file name the server name. So similar to how we do the PE packages for CSM, if you've ever taken a PE package for CSM, we will append the server name to that package. We will now do that with the backup files as well. So what you can do is you'll have your backup file, you'll have the server name in it, and if you offload those off to some common server, you'll know which server each backup file is with or came from, and you'll be able to restore those accordingly. If you're managing multiple CSM servers, or maybe you're doing it for your active and your standby later on, you'll know where it came from. All right, the next RFE is 133002. What this is one that we've been getting asked for quite a while now. We finally were able to implement something for it, but it's a support for global mirror control paths within the port pairing CSV file. So those of you familiar with the port pairing CSV file, you can now edit it through our CSM GUI, but what it does is give you the ability to set port pairings, which will be used when CSM does establishes for PPRC pairs. So that's either Metro Mirror global copy pairs on a DS8000 storage system. And we will use those port pairings and establish the logical paths that allow the replication to occur. Well, in global mirror environments, there's a concept of what they call control paths. What these are is paths between all of your source storage systems of the global mirror environment, where the control paths are used to coordinate the consistency group. So one box is to be determined to be the master box. He's the one that does the coordination, but he needs to be able to talk to any of the other H1 boxes or source boxes in the global mirror solution, so that he can tell them, form a consistency group, and keep the process going. So previously, there was no way to manually define these control paths through the port pairing file. You could go through our pathing wizard and create paths, or you could use the DSCLI to create paths, etc. And CSM would pick those up and see that there was control paths out there, or see that there's paths out there, and choose a master accordingly. But what we now can do in the port pairing file is something similar, make it a lot easier for you. You can specify either an LSS to LSS mapping, which covers all global mirror sessions on those particular LSS to LSS or storage systems to storage system global mirror mappings. Or you can choose an LSS to LSS for a specific session mapping. So you may have multiple sessions on a given set of storage DS8000 storage systems, all doing different global mirror sessions, and you might want each of those to have their different set of control paths. Well, you can specify that in this file as well. Essentially, you'll start the line with GM, comma, and then you'll put in the master box and then the subordinate box. And you'll need a line for each master to subordinate configuration you have for that global mirror environment. The definitions are not bidirectional, so you'll notice that for port pairings for logical paths that we have today, those are bidirectional. We will determine that if you're going from either the first to the second or the second from first, we handle it with the same port pairings. With global mirror control paths, we don't do that. It's all one direction. So the first box is going to be your master box. Your second box is going to be your subordinate box, and you'll need one for each of the config, one for each of the boxes in that H1 config that you have. And I guess the last thing I should note here is that if you set these up in the port pairing file, it's not going to be picked up right away. It will take a new start for the master to occur for us to pick those up. And so if you want to pick them up right away, you'd have to do a suspend, recover, and then a restart of that session in order for us to redefine the master configuration and see the entries in this file and pick those up and establish those control paths accordingly. But hopefully this makes it a lot easier. It helps you provide that redundancy between, so make sure that you have multiple control paths between your master and subordinates that are actually redundant. So you're not choosing control paths that are actually going through the same switch per se. You can set up the right port pairings to use to have that redundancy. All right, the next RFE is 146509. This is another fairly simple one, but to give a little background, a while back, CSM added some changes so that if we had a disconnect to a DS8000 storage system, we would, if we saw that the disconnect reason was an authentication error, we would basically halt our attempts to reconnect because if you try to reconnect too many times in a row right away, you end up locking the user on that system, and someone then has to go in and unlock the user, etc. So to prevent that, if it's an authentication error, say the password expired or someone changed the password, we won't lock up that user. We will prevent the reconnect attempts. But what we found was that there are some cases where their authentication error we thought was an authentication error really wasn't wasn't related to authentication. And so we've made some improvements there so that now only authentication errors really should stop these retries, and all these other errors that may occur, maybe the database internal something or LDAP related, will not force us to prevent the reconnect. We'll continue to try to reconnect and hopefully eventually connect once the issue is resolved. All right, the next one is RFE 117263. This is allowing customers to issue the SaveUI logs within for DS8000 diagnostic information within the CSM GUI. What this is in a previous release we allowed for DS8000 storage systems. You can now select the storage system, and under Select Action you'll see the Create System Diagnostics action. If you click on that, we were allowing you to do an on-demand dump or warm start to the box. Now we have added in 6.2.12 one additional option, which is SaveUI logs. So what the SaveUI logs does is allows the user through CSM to collect, or tell the DS8000 to collect all the kind of interface type logs. So those like HMC communication type logs, ESNI type logs, if you're familiar with ESNI, and that kind of information. So that you can easily collect that versus having to take an on-demand dump for everything, etc. Now, this is very useful maybe for helping with debugging disconnect issues or other kind of issues related to communication with the storage system itself, without having to do the full on-demand dump. I will say though that this CSM still does not provide a way to offload any of those logs. You do have to have the PFE offload those today, the same way you would do for any other sets of logs through DS8000. But this does allow you to easily initiate it. So say you've seen an issue, you can initiate the SaveUI logs, or if support asks you to do the SaveUI logs, you can easily do that through the CSM GUI now. All right, the next one is RFE 149317. This is the enable preserve mirror in a multi-target environment on secondaries after failovers. That's a lot of words there, but CSM supports what they call preserve mirror. It's a feature in DS8000 where you basically have your source is a metro mirror primary of a flash copy relationship, and your target, the flash copy relationship, is also a metro mirror primary, which thus allows the hardware, when you do the flash, to flash at the remote site for those targets of those metro mirror relationships consistently with the source site, and without forcing a full copy to the targets. And so this is a neat feature. However, in multi-target environments, the DS8000 requires the customer to tell the user, tell the hardware which of the pairs, if you have a multi-target relationship, which of those multi-target relationships is the one that should be used for preserved mirror. Well, CSM added a property in for that, so that's a while back. It's called com ibm.csm, the session name, role pair name, and user PFC that you can set so that when CSM does a start and goes to establish those relationships, if we see that property set, we'll go and set the hardware and tell the hardware, use this pair for preserved mirror. The problem happened in a HyperSwap environment that a customer had this set, everything was working just fine, they were taking flashes at their source site, but a HyperSwap occurred, and when they, after the HyperSwap, all their applications are running at the remote site, but also their flash copies. So they continue to want to do their flash copies. The flash copies were getting issued to the secondary, but at that time, those secondaries were not marked for preserved mirror, and so the flashes ended up failing. So what this request was is that if the pair was marked for preserved mirror and a HyperSwap or a failover, say you just did a suspend and a recover, a failover occurred, they needed CSM to mark those secondaries, which are now your primaries, your production volumes, as preserved mirror of relationships, so that the flashes can then continue to go prior to you starting from that site, right? So as soon as you started from that site, we would have marked it again based off the current design. But with this new design, you don't have to do that. Say it was a true disaster, HyperSwap occurred. We will set that right away as part of the HyperSwap or failover process, and your flash copies will continue because you might not be even able to restart the session from Site 2 yet. So hopefully this helps with this change. There's nothing needed to, customer doesn't need to change anything that's using this feature. They already have the property set. It will just automatically pick up and allow the flash copies to continue. All right, and the last work item for this 6.2.12 release that I want to talk about wasn't related to an RFE, but is actually related to something we're doing kind of in the future here in a future release. But we are releasing this piece of it because there's some usefulness to it. And that feature is to be able to associate another session and role pair to your safeguarded copy session. So just to give some background, when CSM implemented safeguarded copy, we knew that there would be so many different flavors, so many different ways that customers might want to use it. So we implemented, instead of implementing a full solution in one session type that included safeguarded copy, what we did was we created a safeguarded copy session and then allow you to, through say the scheduled tasks or other means, tie that to other sessions so that you can say take a safeguarded copy backup of your global mirror secondaries, or take a backup of your metro mirror primaries. Wherever you wanted, you could put it with this new session type. Now, the problem is because they're separate sessions, it's quite easy for customers, especially if they're, say, auto-provisioning stuff. They might create a new volume, add it to their metro mirror session or their global mirror session, but forget that that's associated to a safeguarded copy backup, and thus forget to add a corresponding volume in the safeguarded copy session, so that new data that the new volume that you add, the data for that new volume, you need to make sure that it's backed up as well with all the rest of the volumes. And if you forget to add it to that safeguarded copy session, then it's not protected, right? And so by associating it, you will now say, okay, what session is this safeguarded copy associated with, what role pair, and then most importantly, what role. So what role in that other session matches the H1 role in the safeguarded copy session. So if I were taking backups of our metro mirror secondary, so the metro mirror session would have an H1 and an H2 role pair, and the secondary is your H2 role. So that H2 role, all the volumes in that H2 role are the same as your H1 volumes in your safeguarded copy session. So when you go through this wizard and just do the association, after you set it, CSM will now go and compare all the volumes in that H2 role of your metro mirror session to all the volumes in the H1 role of safeguarded copy session. And if any don't match, if there's more in the metro mirror session or more in the safeguarded copy session, or etc., then a warning message in the detailed status section of the session will appear on both the sessions, both the metro mirror and the safeguarded copy session, so that you are alerted that the volumes are not, the role pairs are not the same, and thus you need to either add or remove to one of the sessions in order to make sure that they are coordinated. So hopefully you'll see that this is a nice way to make sure that, just a double check on you to make sure that you did add things to the right place, or you remove things from all the right places. And then you'll see in the future it has some additional advantages that we'll get into later on. But this is hopefully a stepping stone to getting you to a little more added protection, a little more feeling that you make sure that you did things correctly when you set things up. Now, and that's pretty much concludes my video. So here's some helpful links on how to get to the support portal, the support matrix, latest downloads, etc. And always, I encourage you to go to the RFEs, look what's out there, vote for anything you feel that you need or want in CSM, as well as create your own. So if you have something that's will make your life easier, something that you need, it's important that you need, please open an RFE you'll see that we do try to implement as many RFEs each release that we can, and listening and talking to the customers through our RFEs. So encourage you, go look at the RFEs, go vote for RFEs, go create RFEs, and we will implement them to the best of our ability. Thank you for your time, and hope you enjoy the 6.2.12 release, and we will talk to you later.